All right. Hi, everyone. I know some of you are starting to join from the waiting room right now. I want to give everyone a few moments to get in and get settled, get your audio working, make sure everything's all set. And I see a bunch of people joining right now. Awesome. All right, wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And those of you that were registered for last week and could be very flexible with us and come this week, we really appreciate it so much. And I'm glad a lot more people were able to attend with the slight shift in the date. So thank you all for being here. And let's see, I know a couple people still coming in. Let everyone hear. Okay. You guys are all here tonight for an AP Mastery webinar. For those of you that are students here, you'll have some opportunities to ask some questions. Same thing for you parents out there. We have a wonderful panel tonight of Nova Star Prep coaches who are going to be able to answer these questions, share some insights from their experiences, touch base on a variety of AP subjects. So this isn't just AP math or anything along those lines. We're covering a wide variety tonight. And I will also be part of the discussion, mostly asking questions because these guys are the experts joining us, but as from a guidance counselor point of view. If you've attended any Nova Star Prep webinars before, you've probably seen me. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I am a former high school guidance counselor and college coach, and I've been a tutor for English and college writing for over 15 years. So we're going to get into all the details of the people that you want to hear from the most tonight momentarily. And so without further ado, I just want to mention a couple of things as we dive in. We always like to thank you for attending tonight. So I'll be sending all of this information to you all later, but we will be sharing a special with you if you'd like to do some AP prep. This can be for the AP exams coming up. Some students preview it during the summer. This can be for getting started next year. So I'll send you all the details about getting a free tutoring hour. Maybe you'll end up working with one of our panelists, and that it can be helpful to you moving forward. And tonight, as I mentioned, we're covering strategies for success in both the classes and on the exams. Understandably, for a lot of you attending tonight, the exams are coming up rather quickly. And in the next 3 to 4 weeks, you will be taking perhaps one exam. Some of your students might be taking 5. Some might be taking even more than that. So we've gathered a panel of some of our strongest AP coaches to really talk to you about their expertise, but ways to just feel reassured going into this process and give you some practical advice. And at this point, what I'd like to do is just ask the members of our panel to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their AP background, their teaching background, and their tutoring background. So Maria, we can start with you just because I'm looking at the pictures in that order, and then everyone can go from there.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Maria Hussein. I graduated from the University of the Virgin Islands with my Bachelor's of Science in Biology. During my undergraduate years, I was a tutor for science and math. I tutored chemistry, biology, and the algebras. And I am now currently a tutor at Nova Star, mainly also tutoring science and math. I tutor AP chemistry, any chemistry courses like Gen Chem, and math courses like algebra. And yeah.
Great. How about you, Chad?
Sure. So I have been teaching a long time. I've taught for about 26 years. Most of that time was in a face-to-face classroom here in rural Tennessee where I live. And have taught a variety of social science classes over the years, mainly AP US history for most of those years. I now teach exclusively online, both with tutoring help like this, and then also teach some full classes. And I have been an AP reader at the AP US History Reader for 21 years. And for the last, I don't know, probably almost 10 years, I've been an exam leader. Once they did the redesign, I have been an exam leader and in charge of the short answer free response questions, usually for the operational exam, sometimes for the international. So I've also been able to teach AP European and AP World and AP US Government and AP Comparative. So almost all of the social sciences, no psychology, but pretty much the rest.
Perfect. Thank you, Chad. All right, Zenobia, on to you.
I'm Zenobia. I have been teaching for about 8 years, but I spent most of my professional career working in either the corporate world or abroad in international relations. I got a bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, in economics and Spanish. Then I got an opportunity to be a fellow, the Department of Political Science at U of I. So I have a master's degree in political science. And then I went on to work at the Federal Reserve as an associate economist. Then I decided I wanted to expose all the corruption I saw. And I lived in Chicago. I'm from Chicago originally. So I decided I wanted to be a journalist. And again, University of Illinois, they said, well, you can come back and we have another fellowship. So I said, okay. So I did a master's degree in journalism. I wanted to cover everything except for anything related to the Middle East. So of course, I started my career in the Middle East, and I ended up covering the Arab-Israeli conflict for about 6 years. Then I moved to New York City, and I continued working in that capacity, but not journalism in research. I got really tired, really tired. War is tiring. So one of my professors suggested I start teaching, and I did that 8 years ago. And I teach a lot of things, most of the APs, all the social sciences, Spanish, Lit, Lang, Psych. I teach a lot of things because I'm just really good at school, and that's the only thing I'm really good at. That's what I found out. And I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's, I think it's not often that we have tutors that can cover so many APs. And I think what we mentioned when we were looking to start this panel too, is we really wanted to make sure that we were helping parents, not just with what we refer to as the high flying APs, like, we want to make sure we're covering all of them, because students today take more APs than ever. And sometimes they're taking them independently because their school does not offer the one that they want and they're trying to cover it on their own. We do have several students, for example, that work with us to independently take APs that perhaps they're in a very small school that doesn't offer it, or they're just it couldn't fit in their schedule, so they're trying to study for the exam over the summer to take it the following year, things of that nature. And then today, students are just taking a lot more higher level classes. They're trying to differentiate themselves in a always ever-changing college admissions process, where sometimes SAT scores are the most important, then that goes down a little, then it goes to GPA, then it goes to rigor, and it moves around quite a bit. If you've been paying attention in the last 5 years, the SAT optional conversation, or an ACT as well, has ebbed and flowed, but APs have remained very important, and as a good gauge for students' ability to translate into the college setting and the expectations related there. And it's also a good way of showing admissions that you're serious about school and you're serious about really learning how to study at a different level. And so that's why we wanted to put together tonight's presentation, for that reason, and that this is the time of year where the curriculum in AP over the last several weeks and months has gotten more difficult, because it's the second half of the school year. You've accumulated a lot of knowledge and the exams are coming up. Students might also be taking the SAT in May, along with taking multiple APs. So we wanted to make sure that we're here to answer questions that you have and be supportive if you're looking for working with one of our tutors to prepare for the exams coming up. Sometimes that's in a reassurance mode of understanding what to expect on test day, last minute exam tips. Other times it could be a concept that's striking you as more difficult for the exam and you want to work solely on that. But right now, we're going to dive into some questions related to AP exams and related to the classes, and we will have time for parent questions. You can certainly pop them into the Q&A tab that's on here throughout the meeting. I'll probably get to most of them towards the end, but I am going to periodically check so that we can see if it's more timely to answer them. Tonight's webinar is being recorded, so you'll all receive a copy of that and a follow-up email from me with any resources that we share, anything that you need after that. And from there, when you have questions, we'll be here to answer them. I think as long as you three are ready, I think we're ready to dive into some general AP course and exam guidance. As a guidance counselor, a lot of times students struggle to choose which APs, or they choose to try to take every AP, or they don't think they're capable and realize that they are, that there's a lot that comes up with this, and about balancing your AP courses with your honors courses, with sports, with activities, with a job, with family responsibilities. A lot to carry between the ages of 14 and 18, certainly. And so, jumping off from that point, I would like to start with a question of how can students balance taking multiple AP courses while maintaining strong performance in each subject? We get this question quite a bit, knowing that, and this question will come up for students when they're in college. How do you manage all of your college classes at once and maintain that strength across subjects? So whenever one of you is ready, feel free to jump in.
I think it has also a lot to do with your teachers. And I remember from my experience, in order for a student to really excel in the classroom and on the test, the teacher has a lot to do with it. Of course, students have different abilities, but the teacher really should be mentioning the AP exam definitely in the second semester, at the start of the second semester, because there are teachers who will wait until the end and then they'll say, oh, let's start studying for the AP exam. It's 2 weeks away. It doesn't work that way. You have to make sure that the instructors are ready to start helping students prepare for the exam early on so they're not overwhelmed. They have to play a part in it. It's not just the student's responsibility only. And as far as balancing several subjects go, I think it's really important for the student to have realistic expectations about what they're taking on and what it's going to mean. And sometimes that means also sacrificing in certain areas. I know that's not the answer you want to hear, but that's a realistic answer.
Well, and thankfully, over the years, there are more opportunities to take an AP class as a freshman or as a sophomore, and it's usually one or maybe two as a sophomore. Before you hit that junior year, where sometimes students will take two, three, or more. And that senior year, depending on the scheduling, they may take more. They may take a mix of AP and dual enrollment kind of courses. So thankfully, it's a little bit more, they learn how to handle it, especially if they have a very good teacher in the 9th grade or the 10th grade who prepares them for what it's going to be like later in the when they have more AP classes. And it's a juggling act. As far as scheduling goes, I would probably suggest that you don't, and typically this works that way in high school, but you don't want to have like 3 science APs all at once. There's just too much possibility of cross-contamination of what you're learning. So it's probably a good idea to spread out the different courses so that you're taking a social science, a science, a math, or so that they don't overlap too much. It's good to overlap, but not that same year when you're focusing on preparing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Chad said when it comes to spreading out the AP courses. But I also do believe that balancing multiple classes is 100% doable with the right mindset and strategy. And taking on multiple AP courses is an incredible opportunity to also prove to yourself what you're capable of. And I believe the key to being able to best balance taking multiple AP courses is stay consistent and believe in your ability to grow. So my advice would be, starting off small by creating a weekly routine that works best for you and staying consistent with it. Like you don't need to study for hours every single night. You just need to commit to showing up for each subject, even if it's just for a little bit every single day. So, yeah.
That's a really great way of putting it too, and really establishing those routines so you can transfer them into college as well. Because you're going to feel that when you
Mhm.
start to have too much free time in college because you're not in class as much and trying to structure that free time to prepare for those classes. I'll add one thing from, I can't take my guidance counselor hat off, one thing from the social emotional side of things too. What I do encourage students to do is not feel like they have to take the exact AP that all of their peers are taking. So because Sally sitting next to you in class told you she's taking 4 next year, that you have to take 4. You want to pay attention to what you're passionate about, what you want to study in college, what you feel like you could excel in, what you feel like you're very interested in. Because, you know, over the course of my career, I've certainly had students, and Chad, you've probably experienced this, they'll start a push and be like, oh my God, this is so much reading, and realize that it's a lot to take on, my own daughter included. And, you know, that it's one of those things where you experience that right away. So certainly all of this advice makes a lot of sense for the balance aspect of it, and just really talking to your teachers and your counselors at school. And usually teachers are very involved in suggesting whether or not the AP is a right choice for you. And then here, you know, this goes to some of our conversation before in terms of talking about, you know, picking the AP class and doing well in it. And like you said, Zenobia, the shift to when it comes time for the exam. What do you think the biggest difference is between doing well in the class versus excelling on the exam?
I think there's many variables. So you have to understand that some students, they're just really good test takers. They may get a B or a C in the class, but they may get a 5 or a 4 in the exam. So that's realistically, that's how it is. There's another variable, which is, again, I'm going to keep reiterating it. It's the teacher has to really invest the time. And I just remember when I was in high school, I did take a lot of APs, and that it wasn't the subject matter necessarily that I excelled in when it came to the exam. It was how much does my teacher care? And I had a teacher for AP European history, and he started teaching us or getting us prepped for the exam and talking about it even in the first semester. Okay. And he was really invested in it. And we were lucky because that year he wrote our AP exam, but we didn't cheat or anything. I mean, like, he just knew how to prepare us. And then the year later, I took AP US history, and the teacher was just like, we had to bring it up when it's in like 2 weeks, and he's like, oh, no, the teacher has to play a role in it, definitely. And then finally, something that Maria said, executive functioning, like keeping things organized, that was really hard for me. But it was really hard. But if you can do that, I mean, you just really have to be time conscious. And my experience, cramming doesn't help. Like, if you have the choice between going to sleep or spending all night studying for your AP exam, just go to sleep. So that's what I have.
I do want to add to that too about you said the difference between doing well in class and doing well in your exam. And I will say, from a teacher's perspective, that's also very difficult to balance, because if you score, AP exams are a standardized test that compare you to every student across really the world, but definitely the US, and really internationally, lots of students as well. And so it's scored in a very different way than you often score in a classroom. And AP exams are hard. I will say, being at the reading last year, and I'm not really giving a secret away, the scores on most of the social sciences went up considerably this last year. And the reason they went up considerably was a concerted effort to, the College Board realized that over time, the exam had gotten harder, just with content creep and the trying to find questions, because they have to have unique questions pretty much every year. and creating questions that are unique, you run into a problem eventually, because you tend to get less and less mainstream content that everyone covers as you start to grasp for something that's a different kind of question. So there was an intentional plan throughout the social sciences, and I imagine in some of the other subject areas as well, to refocus and focus on mainstream free response questions that all students should have a fair chance to answer. And so I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it went from somewhere like a 40% or less 3, 4, 5 score on the AP history exams to somewhere in the 60-70% range. And the good news for everyone is that's not something that's going to go away tomorrow. I can't promise that 10 years from now it won't creep back in the other direction. But one of the things the College Board really found was that they were getting to the point where they were too much harder than college introductory courses. And so that reset was definitely a necessary thing. I don't know about the sciences, or I just know about the social sciences. But I will say, as readers, when we got to the reading, when we got to see the exam questions, and then when we got to the reading, we were all sort of like floored by how much, and I hesitate to say this, but how much easier the questions were. Now, they're still not easy questions. You're still asking a high school student who is taking a college level course to answer a question about content from a whole year's course. And realistically, in a high school class, in a college class, you generally don't test anyone over an entire year's subject matter. At most, it's a semester's worth of subject matter for the most part. So I will say that's good news. But the other thing I want to say is about the difference in doing well in the class versus the exam. Teachers have the difficult decision of, if you don't make it hard enough, then they're not going to do well on the exam. But that means that you have to be at a higher difficulty and expect more in the classroom than maybe on the exam. So students have to really refocus how to study, how to expect grades to be. And unfortunately, we're a very grade driven society. And you know, it's very shocking when you get your first essay back and you've always been a gifted and talented or a strong student, and you've made 99s and hundreds on everything you've ever turned in. And in that first AP essay, you get 7 out of 9 points. Well, that's going to get you a 5 on the AP exam. But if a teacher straight averages that, that's a 70 or below. And so it's very shocking to adjust to that. Most teachers try to figure out how to make that work. But the variety, and that's left up to teachers, and the variety of how they handle those grade translations can definitely be shocking to a lot of students.
Absolutely. Excellent point there. And I do think, when we take a look at it from the college point of view on this too, I think an extremely rigorous class can show a lot about a student in the sense of their ability. If you're getting, we face the issue today of grade inflation and things that happen with that. And like we were seeing GPAs higher than they've ever been, and sometimes not necessarily for all the right reasons. So that does play a factor in it. Obviously, when it comes to college credit and showing your readiness and things like that, and the exam scores that you're going to have ready for when you actually apply versus the ones that you'll also have ready at the end to transfer for credit. Different story there a little bit. But certainly I appreciate this perspective on it, thinking about the way the test has changed. Anything else on this question before we jump to the next one? I just want to make sure if there was anything else there.
Yeah, so just going off a little bit off of what Chad and Zenobia said. So doing well in class often means keeping up with homework, class participation, and projects, whereas the AP exam really tests your ability to apply the knowledge that you learned throughout the year under time pressure. And biggest takeaway to succeed in both, I would say, staying consistent throughout the year, and about 2 months before the exam, shifting your focus more towards test strategies and practice exams.
Perfect. Thank you. Right. So for students deciding which AP courses to take, which classes would you say tend to complement each other well, and how should they build a balanced schedule? I know we've mentioned already trying not to, even my daughter, who's a sophomore, was trying to decide if she should take AP Bio and AP Chem in the same year and things like that. How do you balance? You're running out of time. You feel like you don't have enough time to take them all. How do you guys recommend, in terms of how they can complement each other, and how you can make that balanced?
Yes. Okay, so I remember dealing with this. Well, first, before I forget, yeah, Bernadette, it's really important to listen to your guidance counselor, and I'm glad that I did. So that's one. I'll get back to that. So the reality is the student is going to think this way. Well, these classes are super easy. This is a category of easy APs. I'm just saying like a general student, and these are the harder APs, okay, generally. So they'll be like psych, easy, I'll take that. Doesn't have to coincide with anything, fine. If you're a senior, AP Gov, fine, just no problem. And then when it comes to picking like more of the harder, rigorous subjects, generally speaking, for most students, I noticed that the kids who were extremely talented in math, they were taking, and I'm saying AP Calc BC, and they were complemented with AP Physics. So that's one trend that I noticed, if they're really good with that. I noticed that when you have to be like real with yourself too. And I noticed that with students by their senior year in my school who are picking a science, generally, most of them who didn't fit the character of like this super smart in math, gifted, but not like above that. They generally went to AP Bio, and that was probably the most popular of the sciences. And then, again, then whatever's left over, like for me, I was like, this is where I'm glad I didn't make this mistake. I was like, if I take AP Calc BC, if I don't take BC and I take AB, that means I'm admitting that I'm dumber than some of the kids. I'm not as smart. So I signed up, everything's AP, put in BC. School's coming to an end. I had gotten sick. Came back to school and so stressed. My friend was like, I'm switching to AB. You should too. And I'm like, just switch. It doesn't matter. It's okay. Sarah's switching, and she's gonna go to an Ivy League. It's okay. I said, okay, maybe. So I go to my guidance counselor, and she's like, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you made this choice. Listen, I'm glad I took AB. So you have to also, like Bernadette said, like everything that your peers are doing, sometimes it's not the best for you, and you'll be happier. And I know it sounds bad, but in order for me to be able to do that, I had to know that certain smart kids were also doing that. So that's how I handled it.
Thank you. It's a lot of pressure the students are under in comparison.
I would add just to that as far as I would reiterate what I said before. For the most part, if you don't overlap in too related a content, that generally will help. But again, like Zenobia mentioned, if you have a student that's particularly gifted in math, they might need to avoid the social sciences if they really don't enjoy them. You don't have to take every AP class. However, the flip side of that is if you do well in an AP US history class, but you don't want to do that for your career, you might not have to take it in college, and that frees you up to be able to take other courses that are in your math interest. So there's two definitely different ways to think about it. In my region, for example, if students take we have at the high school I taught at for many years, my wife still teaches there. And my daughter is a student there now. If you you have options for dual enrollment or AP, and a number of students will take dual enrollment. And if they get a dual enrollment calculus credit, one of the engineering schools in our region won't makes them take it again. It doesn't matter. They may get it as sort of an extra credit, a part of their choices, but they do not get it as that calculus credit. And that also can happen with AP courses in some cases, because they just want to know that you have that foundation at that engineering school. So it is also, if you know what you're going to be doing in the future, that can also directly influence what set of AP courses you want to take. Now, we all know they get to college and then everything changes. So, or they take the AP history class and don't think they like history, and then all of a sudden it's their favorite thing in the world. So that's okay too. It's okay to explore, but all of those are considerations to take, into consideration. And I would argue not to overload necessarily. That said, my oldest daughter had 48 hours of undergraduate credit when she went to freshman year of college, which ended up being a problem because they wanted her to graduate early. And so she had to fight. She ended up with 2 majors and 2 minors in order to have enough classes to not graduate in 3 years. So you have to think about all of those considerations. And it's a complex issue, but it should vary by student, like Zenobia was saying. And too often it doesn't. Too often it's this cohort of kids who do everything together. And Zenobia is right about that. You should be able to do what you need to do, not what the cohort of kids needs to do.
Absolutely, I could not agree more. And Maria, for you on the math and science side of things, in terms of classes that complement each other and ones that don't, any suggestions there for families?
Yeah, so Zenobia did actually also touch on this a little bit. A huge thing is AP Calc and AP Phys. They're a great combo, especially if you're STEM oriented. I would just suggest trying not to take all reading heavy or all math heavy courses in 1 year if you can help it. Like Chad and Zenobia discussed, try to spread them out as much as you can. Classes that don't complement each other, maybe like AP Bio and AP Chem during the same time, wouldn't really complement each other. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's doable, but they don't really complement each other.
Yeah. Not the ideal situation. You can make it work, but not ideal in terms
Yeah.
of there. Absolutely. Great. Thank you. All right. So here's another piece, and this could go back to a lot of our conversation. How can supplemental tutoring support students in building a strong foundation across multiple AP courses? Knowing what you said, Zenobia, sometimes too, it's their teachers sometimes get assigned teaching a class they don't want to teach. That happens. You know what I mean? Or that they don't have as much of a background in it, and they, that does happen. Or unfortunately, a teacher's out for a good portion of the year, you have a long-term sub. Something happens where there's an interruption for the kids who went through COVID and it interrupted their AP learning and things of that nature. Or you yourself, missed some school, or you're just struggling in it. What do you guys feel based on your own tutoring experience, how tutoring can fit into the process of AP?
This is a great question. This question, okay. I taught several AP subjects in a program that taught kids after school, meaning I tutored them in the subject, like what they were being taught in class. I helped them understand it. And I also prepared them for the exam. So 2 separate things. So majority of my classes included AP Psych, AP Lang, AP Lit, AP Geography. Okay. And the most important thing the students took away from that is that they would always say, my teacher, I don't understand them. They're weird. They're mean. They don't care. They're lazy. They're this. Please help me. That's where it helped, because you would think that these were all mostly high performing students, and you would think that they're not going to need like supplemental tutoring for what they're doing in class, but it always went back to a irresponsible teacher. And I believe the students, I believe them. And clarification on certain topics that teacher wasn't able to explain properly. And unfortunately, it sometimes just wrongly explained it. And that's a problem. And second thing, when it came to helping them study for the actual exam, again, it went back to the teacher. I had an AP Psych student say that her teacher, he disappeared for like 6 weeks, and they had a substitute, a different one, continuously. They hadn't opened the AP Psych book to prepare for the exam. They didn't know what was going on. The exam was like maybe 5-6 days away. I needed to sit down with her, show her the structure of the exam, but most importantly, calm her down. It's when the teachers are absent or they're not there, to help the student get focused and get prepared for what's to come, the student gets really anxious. And so a lot of my job was to calm them down and to instill confidence. I took AP Chem, I wish I never did it. You could have like the most genius, my teacher was like a genius in chemistry, but I had no confidence in him preparing me for the exam because I was confused and didn't know how to explain to me properly, or didn't have the patience to explain to me properly. And so I lost all confidence in myself. So I keep emphasizing throughout this entire webinar, like, I am going to put it on the teacher, and I'm a teacher myself. Like, the students, they need confidence.
Couldn't agree more in terms of the confidence aspect. It's a stressful time, and it's one of the most, it feels like the biggest thing happening in your life at the time, and it is very stressful. So certainly, for any subject, tutoring #1 goal should be to build confidence. Especially if you're, of course, there's concepts and everything else, but building the confidence so you're not intimidated by the class. I think we've all been in a position before where you felt as though I'm not a math person, I'm not a this person, I'm not a that, and it's we do it to ourselves a little bit, convincing ourselves of that. Chad, did you want to add something?
I did want to say that the thing I found the most beneficial is opportunities to practice for students with immediate feedback. We all know that in a classroom with 30 students or 20 students, or I was very fortunate to take AP Calculus when I was in high school with 7, so it was a little different back then, but that's rare these days. So when you have 20 to 30 students, you don't get that immediate specific feedback. I did well in the calculus exam because there were 7 of us and the teacher could give us immediate direct feedback. But in the modern reality, it's very rare that you're going to have a class that small. So I think that immediate practice feedback is extremely beneficial to students at building confidence, like Zenobia said, and just practicing what you have to do on the exam. And I think that's maybe one of the most beneficial ways that you get support in that foundation for the AP courses.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah, and having a tutor also means, having someone in your corner who can break down big assignments, keep you accountable, and, cheer you on. So, as Zenobia said, it really gives you the confidence and skills you need to handle a heavy workload and still have time to breathe.
Absolutely. And I think it does a great job too of giving you that third party that's not necessarily associated with your school. It's not a friend in your study group. It's not your parents. It's somebody else that maybe in class you didn't want to raise your hand and ask that question. You felt nervous about how to phrase it, or you feel like all your friends are getting it and maybe you're not. And it gives you a really safe place to ask those questions and get concepts reinforced. Great. All right, so some subject-specific exam strategies for this section of questions that we have here. So we'll dive into those. What would you say are the most common mistakes students make when preparing for AP exams in your subject? So I know some of you have multiple, but generally speaking, what have you seen that you look back and you wish a student hadn't done, or that you needed to correct that approach so that they could succeed?
I'll start with my sort of pet peeve in the social sciences. I as a reader and as a teacher in the social sciences, never, ever, ever there's always an exception, but for the most part, never ever use personal pronouns in writing. And I always use this example. I think the US is the best country in the world, or the US is the best country in the world. That's just a quick example. The stronger argument is your second. Now, the readers aren't going to necessarily penalize you for using that personal pronoun. And I will say in English and in other subjects, sometimes it's perfectly okay. But generally in social studies, to make the strongest answer that you can, you always want to leave yourself out of it, and you're writing it more as a historian would write it. And a historian in a textbook, or definitely in a textbook, but also in like a personal historian's writing, unless they're writing about themselves. If they're writing about a historical event, they're going to leave that out. I know that's a very minor thing and it's a pet peeve, but it does make the students look weaker when we get to the AP reading. And you don't want to appear weak to the readers. You want to the other big thing is just make sure you know what you're talking about. Make sure that you understand the question before you start writing it, that you take the time to pre-write and understand that question, because so many times they'll go off on a tangent, and the way they're scored today is very different than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was a very holistic model. And so there was a little more leeway to reward a smart student who answered the wrong question. Today, if they answer the wrong question, they think they're answering the right question, they're not going to get any points, because it is much more specifics driven rubric. They're looking for specific things that are accomplished in the essay. And so that's a biggie. The other thing is time management on multiple choice, because now all of the AP social sciences are passage driven or image driven. And so you have to learn how to deal with those types of multiple choice questions. They are not like the old style where it's whether or not you know it. They're whether or not you can actually analyze and use skills to look at the documents. And that's a big change that students still struggle with.
All excellent points there, Chad. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yes. So I think another common mistake is cramming or passively reviewing notes instead of actively practicing. And by actively, I mean doing practice problems, explaining concepts out loud, or teaching them to a friend. Those are way more effective. And I also see that, students tend to ignore essays or FRQs until the last minute, like practicing them like the last minute before their AP exam, when they should be practiced early on and often.
Absolutely.
I teach a variety of subjects, from AP Econ, AP Calc, all the way to AP Lit, AP Lang, and very important, especially for students who get easily overwhelmed, or students who are easily distracted or have ADHD. For all students, but especially for people who get overwhelmed. For all the exams that I teach, there's a pattern. You look back in the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's a pattern to the exams. What I did for the students, and what I told them, if you don't have a lot of time, number one, know the formula, know the exam, know the structure. So like know the skeleton, know how many multiple choice, know how many essays there are, and know the point system, okay? Start there. Don't worry about what's happening in class right now for the class grade, worry about the exam, okay? So they get to know the formula. I teach it to them, okay, this is AP Econ. This is how many multiple choice you're gonna get for macro. This is micro. This is how it's structured. This is the point system, okay? Then get to know go to the website, College Board, collect the exams that they have there for practice. Look at the exams. You don't necessarily have to take them. Look at the question. Look at the way the student who got full points answered it. Go to the second exam. Do this for, 4 or 5 exams. Find the pattern. Okay, it's not how much you write. It's if you hit the points. That's it. And I tell them to go back to multiple choice and do the same thing. Just follow the pattern and focus on your strengths. When you don't have a lot of time, focus on your strength. For me, for example, I'm bad at multiple choice. I'm just an overthinker. And I argue in my head about the right answer. So I don't focus on that. I focus on doing as well as I can for free response. Okay, so it's so hard sometimes to differentiate between when you're at the last minute and you're like, I have the final coming up. This is what it's going to cover. I have the test coming up a few days earlier. This is what it's going to cover. You're going to have to focus on the test. So that's what I tell them to do. I wanted to mention one thing that just came to my head. I don't know if any students would do this, but you do have an option not to take an exam. You do. So sometimes I had multiple AP exams on the same day that I had to take. I took them, but thinking back, I did have an option. And if you know you're probably not going to do well, you might get a 3 or 2, and you just don't want to deal with it, and you know that AP Chem is not your thing, and you want to go take your AP Spanish and perfect that, and know you're going to get a 5 if you used all your time to study for AP Spanish instead of splitting the 2, you have an option. Don't worry about your friends. You probably won't see them again in 10 years.
Thank you, Zenobia. And I know exactly what you mean there. And
Yeah.
certainly, sometimes that pressure at the end and when you've decided to take so many, it can really start to creep up as you get towards exam season, and really trying. And just like we talk about with college, right? You're going to figure out in college very quickly which classes require the most time of yours to get really ready for and which ones you can kind of, play around with how much you study and how much you do things. Same thing when you get to exam season and final exam for the class season, which that is not optional, right? So that piece when you come to the end there. One thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask if we can just, I mean this in the nicest way possible, short answers because we got 10 minutes left. And I know that Maria has to leave a couple minutes early to go tutor one of our students. So for the next ones, if you guys can give a couple answers to this, parents and students, if you want to add some questions into the chat, even if we do not get to them, I'm going to email my colleagues after this and share those questions with them so that if they have any feedback, we can let you know if we don't get to any of them. We're just having such a good conversation. Probably should have scheduled an hour and a half for this one. It's so good. But here, so AP exams often test both content knowledge and critical thinking. And I know we've touched on some of this already in terms of how students practice applying what they've learned, especially in subjects like AP History, the AP Sciences, or AP English. I was an AP Lit student, for example. It's very different than the AP Lang test. They're very different animals in that sense. But any, quick advice you'd give in this scenario?
Well, for preparing for the exam, you basically have to look at the exams and practice with exam questions. Your teacher should be able to, and actually I think students can probably access them as well. Really, the full released free response sections every year are available. The operational, the main test, there are usually several forms of the test, so not all of them are, but there's usually one, or in the recent years, 2 versions of the free responses released. Most of the exams have at least one set of multiple choice questions. And we all know that if you Google, you're going to be able to find some questions. However, if your teacher's willing, get them to sort of point you in the right direction, because not all of the questions on the internet are created equal. And some are going to be good practice and some are not going to be good practice. I'd love to give you the better answer of Well, go out and do some historical research because everyone should. But in the context of doing well on the exam, you've just got to practice with those questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Maria, anything from you before I let you go? I know you gotta
Yes.
run.
So I think, like Chad said, just practice, practice, practice. And, for subjects like AP History or AP Science, try explaining the concept and then connecting it to a real world example or theme so that you get it in here, like so you could like really understand it. And then for English, like AP Lang and AP Lit, I think practice analyzing passages, not just summarizing them. Like the College Board really loves when you can interpret and argue, not just recall the facts stated in the passage.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. And while we have you, Chad, we got a question specific to perhaps one of your classes. I think, Zenobia, you've done this one as well, too. How far in advance should I begin reviewing for AP World History? That came in the Q&A.
Depends on where you are in the country. If your school starts in August, you should start in August. If your school starts in September, you should start in September. So really, you need to be reviewing all year. As Zenobia mentioned and Maria, we've all mentioned, it's the kind of thing where you can't cram it all in. So if you haven't already started, please start now. It's past time. Now, that doesn't mean you can't review a lot in a short amount of time, especially if you have guidance and help on that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you. And if everyone could just silently thank Maria before she takes off really quickly. I know she needs to run, but we will, if questions come up in her discipline, we will send them her way and we'll get them back to you after that. And perhaps one of you will end up working with her. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
All right. And we just got another question from the audience. Let me see. Oh, nope. I think it's already answered. Good. Okay, perfect. All right. So for the next one here, in subjects with multiple choice and free response, like AP Science or Math, what strategies should students use to maximize their scores in both areas? So I know we're getting to a place where we've touched on little elements of this in terms of the types of multiple choice questions out there and the FRQs that we see and things like that. Anything else you two would like to add here?
I can't see the question. Can you repeat it?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. In subjects with multiple choice and free response, like the AP Science, AP Math, what strategies should students use to maximize their scores in both areas?
That's okay.
Oh,
This is where the big differences between the social sciences and the maths. With the math and science, it's really important that their in-class foundation is actually really strong. So for example, AP Calculus, you're just gonna have to like make sure it's kind of like taking the final already for school. You have to be prepared as you were to be prepared for taking the final, but like for the whole year's worth of curriculum. And across the board, any exam, it's just a lot of practice.
Perfect. Thank you. Right. And another question came up here that perhaps Zenobia might be best equipped to answer in terms of how any different prep you suggest for foreign language APs. This one individual mentioned German, but just with your experience with AP Spanish, other classes like that, any suggestions here? And Chad, certainly jump in as you can on this one too, just knowing that the languages are different. There is the speaking part, there is different elements to the test.
So, in my experience with the languages, it's good news. It's from my experience teaching it, I had the most students taking an AP language exam without having to take the class, because you can still take the exams without taking the class. So for foreign languages, I would just recommend, again, either getting a book. You can even get the books online as PDFs for free, like Barron's or Princeton Review. I recommend Barron's more, and just practicing those tests. I think this is an area where it actually has more to do with the student's knowledge rather than just in-class preparation.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. And in terms of that too, with the speaking elements of tests, would you recommend meeting with somebody that speaks the language before or has experience in the class so that you know that you can start to get ready for that? Going in a cold can be really tough on exam day.
Oh yeah, definitely. The best way that I studied was studying with my friends, honestly.
Mhm.
If that is something that you're okay with doing, I would definitely do that. Or um, tutor is the best way if you don't want to study with your friends.
Absolutely. Perfect. And just, I mentioned before that I might tell a funny story, but when I took AP Spanish, the fire alarm went off during my speaking portion. So that was, was a startling experience that for some reason they scheduled a, a fire drill during the AP Spanish exam. And so let's just hope that doesn't happen to any of you. And I think, Chad, you already caught the next question on there, I think, from the audience in terms of how do you recommend covering all the information in a history class? Anything you want to share out loud too?
Well, just so everyone hears it, I would use outlines, and they're readily available. Again, it might be good to ask your teacher or a tutor to help you find ones that are suitable, or checklists, and don't try to relearn everything. If you look at that outline and you know the first three things well, but you have no idea what the fourth thing is, do some research and find out what that fourth thing is so that you can more target your review. And I do want to mention, I put in the chat that anyone wants to look, the changes in three of the social sciences last year with a 47.5 to 72% jump in 3, 4s, and 5s, a 49.2 to 70, and you can look at it. It's there for anyone that wants to look in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for adding that there. All right, let's see. And I know you guys have to probably go in a moment too. Let's see if we can get to one or two more here. So we've talked about this a little bit. How does working with a subject-specific AP tutor help students close knowledge gaps? I think we've touched on this in the sense that it reinforces concepts, builds confidence, and can help differentiate between perhaps the way it's being taught in class versus the way that your learning style would benefit from it. So we can jump ahead on that one. So time management and study plans, we just got this question a few times in the chat, right? So people are thinking about it, starting to study for AP exams. And as you've heard from Chad and from Maria before she left and Zenobia tonight, it's an ongoing process, right? So we do know that, and I think the advice of knowing that staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning isn't going to necessarily give you a great test day the next day. Anything else you two would like to add on this question, knowing that it's at the forefront of parents' minds? Not
Same
really.
thing Chad said. Start
Yep.
as early as you can.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see. We've already talked about using official AP practice exams. You guys are so good. You're ahead on all of these questions here, so we know that that's a great one. Let's see. Okay. If they're falling behind who have started studying later in the semester, how can tutoring help them catch up? I do think we covered that too, so I think we're in good shape with that question as well. So just anything for final exam prep and for the AP exam, I should say. Any top tips for managing stress, stamina during the actual AP exam? So thinking about where our students will be 3 weeks from now. Any final tips right before test day?
So for my experience and experience working with students who are more like me, who stress, look, it doesn't matter. I know no one could have told me that, but it really doesn't matter. It's okay if you don't get a 5. The most important thing though, just relax. I wish I had known that, because when I would go into exams relaxed, I would do much better, whether or not I was good at the subject. Relax.
Absolutely.
I would say, and this is going to sound silly, but actually psychology shows chew gum or have candy with you if your school will let you, and they should, because that actually activates your brain. And I know that sounds crazy, but it also might help with stress, particularly if you're a gum chewer, but or a Jolly Rancher or something, because that actually might help you focus in ways, and that's a definite. But also, it's a test. It's not going to change your life either way. All of them together might, but one test sitting is not going to change your life. You're going to still have a great life 10 years from now. It might be different than what you expected. So if you can think of that as you're going into taking the test and just not stress about it.
Absolutely. And I think, telling our students today, we were all there, we've all done it, we've all watched students go through it. And right now we know it's easier said than done. But looking back, we all know that trying to breathe and trying to relax through it and realizing it is not the end all be all of everything you've worked for. This is a moment in time, and what happens with it is going to be what happens, and you're still going to be on the path to the next step in your goals. And there was a question about AP computer science. I don't believe either of you have backgrounds in that class in particular, just tips for studying for it. Because I can ask one of our other tutors. I did see that question in there, Shraja, and I will get that answer to you, just so that you can have some specifics there from some of our AP computer science tutors that we have who couldn't make it here tonight. And then I think, let's see. All right, college and more. In terms of how do colleges actually view AP classes on transcripts, especially when a student doesn't take the corresponding exam or doesn't score a 4 over 5. We've talked about this a little bit, and Chad, you mentioned sometimes too, like you think they're going to take it and they don't, and there's situations where you assumed a 4 would be taken and it wasn't. I had a bizarre experience where my 5 on my AP Spanish exam got me out of a math class. Don't know how that happened. Like really strange things that can occur, or students who didn't think they were going to get credit for it by getting a 3 and they ended up getting credit. So I think from the college admissions side of things, I do think they like to see the classes on your schedule, or if you're at an IB school and complement it with an AP or something along those lines. If you have a mix of honors and AP classes, that certainly shows rigorousness. And I know sometimes, for junior year, an admissions representative might wonder why you didn't take the exam, but there is a spot on the Common app called additional information where if you do feel like explaining it could be helpful, you can, but you also don't have to explain that you didn't take the exam. But if you feel as though that could be helpful in a situation, I do recommend that you note something there. But if you did very well in the class, they're happy to make you pay to take a class when you're there in it too. So, they won't be too concerned about that overall. Anything else that I missed here from your experience, Chad and Zenobia?
Doesn't matter. I'm confidently, with conviction, telling you that your students' self-esteem may be tied to their grades or their AP exam score, but it is nowhere an indication of their success in life. There's very little correlation.
It's a moment sitting in a classroom taking a test. And sure, it's great when it's really good, and it's hard when it doesn't go your way. But it's a moment in time, and that's why we have an entire admissions profile, right? That's why there's the essay, the GPA. That's why you're seeing SAT and ACT scores come back. That's why you're seeing way more students taking dual enrollment classes to showcase their ability to manage higher expectations that mirror a college level class. So there's a variety of ways, and we do have college admissions profile webinars where we talk about this and talk about building the rest of your profile. So these are other elements too. This is one piece of the overall puzzle, and there's a lot of pieces to it. And I think, let's see, last question just for our parents here. What can parents do to support their students during AP season? This will be the last question for tonight, I believe.
Nagging's not going to help. That's a default. I'm a parent, so I have 3 children, and I probably nag too. But just know that's not going to help. That's probably going to cause a way more problems in the long run. Be supportive. Expect a lot from them, but don't. If they were blowing off studying for a little while, maybe they have to. Explore that with them, ask them why they're not wanting to study and see if you can come up with strategies and reasons to get them to study rather than, oh, you need to go study. Turn that TV off, turn that game off, go study. It's not going to help. If you actually have a conversation about it, it might.
Yeah, my parents had to do the opposite. They they told me to stop, just go have fun. And I got upset. I couldn't believe they didn't understand how important this was. So it can go the other way. And if it's that, if you have a neurotic kid like I was, then it's best to just be like, oh, I'm here to support you. All I needed was like verbal validation, just a calm, supportive presence.
And that's either student, either way, that's
Yeah.
the most is calm, validation, and support.
Absolutely. And, again, as much as, the anxiety will creep up and it will happen, I say this as a parent myself as well, that it's just becoming very anxious about it before the test. You're putting yourself through it twice because you're going through it in your head and you're trying to prepare as much mentally in your head and trying to anticipate how tough the essay question's going to be and how you're going to feel after. And it's you're just going to end up putting yourself through it twice. And parents too, just it's a moment in time. It's one test. Just I say the exact same thing about the SAT and the ACT. It's you sitting in a room for a few hours. It's not who you are as a person. Sure, it can show that you did really well in a class. It can show your ability to retain information, apply it, think critically. It's all very good. It's not a bad thing to get a great score on the exam, but it's a moment in time, and there's so much more to what your child can do and what they're capable of than any given day.
On a side note, when I was teaching in the classroom, I did work with gifted students quite a bit. And I, when possible, encouraged them to take it freshman year and just not even worry, not even care. And
Yeah.
sometimes that was the best score they got their entire high school career
Right.
because they would get more and more stressed over time.
Right. And the pressure feels greater as they get closer to college applications and everything else. Yeah.
It's a great idea.
A really good idea. Fantastic.
Either freshman or sophomore year, and just there's no stress. Just take it for fun, which sounds crazy, but
Well, and I think you're right. This goes back to one of your original points, Chad, that the freedom students have today to take some APs a little bit earlier. It very much did used to be you had to try to cram them into junior and senior year, and no way would it fit your schedule, or you're trying to take your PE class over the summer so that you can fit in AP physics or whatever it might be because of all the limit of hours in a day. And so now that we see more students taking some sophomore year and taking some junior year and being able to spread them out a little bit can help reduce some of that stress, certainly. But again, it's all going to work out. It's going to be fine. And like Zenobia said, if you're curious about how you're feeling about that actual test and you're looking at the other ones and feel like you can do better, that's where you can have a conversation with a tutor, with your parents, with your guidance counselor, and ask for suggestions about how to approach the test. As a last thing here, I did just want to mention certainly any of our panel members, but we do have an entire team of AP tutors that if you're looking to get some help leading up to the AP exams in May, certainly across the board in almost every subject. I say almost every because there's a couple of very specific ones that sometimes there's one or two tutors for them. Certain languages come up and things like that. But across every single subject, we have tutors available for that. If you're looking for SAT, ACT prep, certainly this is where a lot of students are getting ready for the May exam, which is coming up very quickly, getting ready for the June, the August, and the College Board has added a new September SAT this year. So that's a new offering because the digital exam can get the scores back so quickly that they can now offer another date. And the ACT has gone digital. They still have paper as well, though. So some changes to the test. And certainly we have an entire team of college admissions coaches, which you can also meet with them before you're even ready to do applications to talk about your AP strategy, for example, and they can help you out with certain majors and what might be helpful. And, like Zenobia said, I'm not planning on studying any of this. I don't need to take this class. It's not, I'm not going to force myself because Tommy Smith is taking the class too, and I have to. So talk to your guidance counselor about that, but you can also talk to a college coach who's very familiar with the schools or majors you might be interested in. And last but not least, what was that?
I'm a college coach for.
Yes, perfect. So that's great. And I think, here too, we also, if you want to study with your friends, we do offer small group tutoring. So if you have a couple of friends and you want to have a couple of small group sessions, the cost is reduced. You can be with your friends and feel comfortable. Some people prefer to do it one-on-one, understandably, but we have a variety of options. And I really hope that some of you can end up working with some of our panel members and some of our other great learning coaches here at Novastar for a variety of subjects. Awesome. And I think that's it for us today. I can't thank Chad and Zenobia and Maria enough for joining today. I hope everyone received the information that they were hoping for, but I do encourage you to email me. You saw it on some of the slides. I'll be emailing you as well, but Bernadette@novastarprep.com if you have any questions. We have so much knowledge here that we can share. I just probably can't hold you all hostage for 3 hours tonight. So if you have questions, do let us know, and I'll pass those on to our team, and we'll be sure to get back to you. And was that one more question in here? So let me make sure. Okay, for AP group tutoring, how does the tutor assess each student's needs and tailor the group sessions? It is a little bit different than one-on-one. And so I did see a question there. We do have psych for group tutoring. We do have that available. And so for that parent, I'll email you directly about how it works for AP group tutoring. But understandably, in the time frame that we have leading up to the test, there's only so many sessions that you can have in the next few weeks. So it would be tailored, but also general to an extent in terms of what you can expect to find on the test. All right. So just some mock tests coming up here. We have the digital enhanced ACT mock test on 4/26, SAT mock on 5/10. I'll be emailing you all the information from tonight. And Chad and Zenobia, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the really extremely thoughtful answers that you gave our parents, the candidness with which you know how this goes. You've both been doing this for a long time. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for joining us tonight. All right. Everyone have a great night, and I'll talk to you all
Bye.
soon. Thank you.